It's 1972, and a soft rock love song called Precious and Few is playing on practically every AM station in the country, on its way to selling over 1 million copies. Ask almost anyone under 50 today, though, and they'll draw a total blank, even though the song was inescapable at the time. Songs like that used to be everywhere, dominating the airwaves and jukeboxes for a few months before quietly disappearing from memory almost entirely. So today, we're counting down nobody remembers these 10 songs anymore, except people born in 60s and 70s. Number 10, Run Joey, Run by David Geddes.
So run, Joey, run, Joey.
Producer and songwriter Paul Vance, already known for hits like Catch a Falling Star and Itsy Bitsy Teeny Weeny Yellow Polka Dot Bikini, pulled David Geddes, a Michigan native and law student at Wayne State University at the time, who had quietly released a few earlier singles with little success, back into the recording studio to sing this melodramatic story song in 1975. The plot follows a pregnant teenage girl named Judy, voiced in spoken interludes by Vance's own young daughter, Paula, who calls to warn her boyfriend, Joey, to stay away from her enraged, gun-wielding father, only for Joey to rush toward the house anyway, resulting in Judy being fatally struck by the bullet herself while trying to shield him. Released that July, Run Joey Run reached number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100 by early October and topped the Cashbox chart entirely, part of a wider 1970s trend of dramatic teenage tragedy songs.
Every night, the same old dream. I hate to.
Geddes returned to law school not long after its release, and although he scored one more minor hit later that same year, he never had another major pop single. Geddes did manage one more minor hit later that same year with the similarly melodramatic The Last Game of the Season, A Blind Man in the Bleachers, which reached number 18 before largely stepping away from a national recording career. Decades later, the song still occasionally surfaces on lists of the era's most over-the-top hits, and it was even revived for a comedic cover performance on the television show Glee, introducing the strange, unforgettable story to an entirely new generation who had never heard the original. Vance had built his songwriting career decades earlier, penning hits like Itsy Bitsy Teeny Weeny Yellow, Polka Dot Bikini, and Tracy, and by 1975, he was confident enough in the formula of teenage melodrama to build an entire hit single around his own young daughter's voice pleading for a boy's life.
Joey, run, Joey, run.
Number 9, The Night Chicago Died by Paper Lace.
Daddy was a cop on the east side of Chicago.
Paper Lace was a British band from Nottingham who first found a national audience on the television talent show Opportunity Knocks before scoring a UK hit earlier in 1974 with Billy, Don't Be a Hero, only to watch an American group beat them to the punch with a rival cover version that topped the chart stateside instead. Songwriters Peter Callander and Mitch Murray, the same pair behind the ballad of Bonnie and Clyde for Georgie fame back in 1968, handed the band another story song soon after, this one built around a completely fictional shootout between Chicago police and Al Capone's gang, told from the perspective of a boy waiting anxiously to learn whether his police officer father survived the night. Despite taking considerable liberties with Chicago geography and history, including references to an east side of the city that doesn't actually exist, and a shootout between police and Al Capone's gang that never happened in reality, the song became a massive hit anyway, reaching number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in August 1974 and staying on the chart for 17 weeks.
In the heat of a summer night.
It also reached number 3 back home in the UK. This time, Paper Lace's own version won out over the competition, giving the band its only American number 1 and a small measure of redemption after losing out on Billy, Don't Be a Hero earlier that same year. Their earlier hit, Billy, Don't Be a Hero had actually reached #1 in the UK for Paper Lace, only for a competing American cover version by Bo Donaldson and the Haywoods to beat their original to the top of the US charts instead. A frustrating near miss the band was determined not to repeat. Billy, Don't Be a Hero also reportedly became a personal favorite of Queen Elizabeth II, who requested the band perform it when they played London's famous Palladium Theatre. They never returned to the top of the American charts again, and the song faded from regular rotation not long after. The Night Chicago Died was released as a single in mid-June 1974 and spent 17 weeks on the Billboard Hot 100 altogether before finally reaching #1 that August for a single week, a lengthy chart run for a song that most listeners today would no longer recognize by title alone.
When the town of Chicago died.
Number 8, Beach Baby by First Class.
Beach baby, give me your hand, give me some.
This song wasn't recorded by an actual touring band at all, but was instead the work of veteran British songwriter John Carter, formerly of the 1960s group The Ivy League, and his wife, Jill Shakespeare, who wrote it in their home in southwest London as a tribute to early 1960s American surf pop. Carter recruited veteran session singer Tony Burrows, already known for lending his voice to several other one-hit wonders under different band names, to record the lead vocal under the name The First Class in February 1974. Released that May, Beach Baby reached #4 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the United States and climbed all the way to #1 in Canada that October, even though it only managed #13 back home in the UK. A rare case of a British studio project finding far more success overseas than in its own country. Because the record existed purely as a studio project, Carter had to assemble an entirely separate group of musicians just to tour and make television appearances as The First Class once the song became a hit.
And everybody drove a Chevrolet. Oh.
Burrows was already something of a phenomenon in the British music industry by that point, having achieved the remarkable feat in 1970 of having 4 different songs charting simultaneously under 4 different band names, including Edison Lighthouse's Love Grows and Brotherhood of Man's United We Stand. Beach Baby alone sold over 1 million copies worldwide and remains the song most closely tied to his career, even though most listeners at the time had no idea who was actually singing it. The band released a follow-up album full of similarly nostalgic California-themed songs, but nothing else they released came close to matching the success of that first single. The song was recorded in a single evening session at Lansdowne Studios in London in February 1974, and because the record existed purely as a studio project with no real touring band behind it, American radio stations simply dropped the word from the group's name, billing them as First Class instead.
Beach baby, there are the sand.
Number 7, Precious and Few by Climax.
Precious and few are the moments sweet.
Sonny Geraci had already experienced stardom once before as the lead singer of the 1960s hit band The Outsiders, when a legal dispute with the group's original founder over rights to that name forced him to rebrand with bandmates Walter Nims and Nick D'Amico as Climax in 1970. Guitarist Nims wrote this romantic ballad, and an early version sat mostly unnoticed for months after its initial 1971 release, until producer Larry Cox encouraged the band to rework it into a fuller, more orchestral arrangement. A radio station in Santa Barbara started playing the new version after it had sat archived for months, and after test runs in Hawaii, Buffalo, and Boston built momentum, Precious and Few climbed to #3 on the Billboard Hot 100 by late February 1972 and reached #1 on the Cashbox chart. It sold over 1 million copies and was certified gold that February. despite the song's massive success, which included over 1 million copies sold and a gold certification from the RIAA that same February.
If I can't find my way back home.
None of Climax's follow-up singles managed to break into the top 40, and the band quietly disbanded within a few years. Geraci had first tasted stardom as the lead singer of The Outsiders, whose 1966 hit Time Won't Let Me reached number 5 on the Billboard, hot 100 years before Precious and Few came along. None of Climax's other singles, including Life and Breath and Walking in the Georgia Rain, managed to crack the top 40, and the band effectively disbanded by the mid-1970s. Geraci eventually left the music business altogether to work in his family's home improvement business before returning to perform on the oldies circuit later in life, until his death in 2017 following a brain aneurysm. Precious and Few was written by guitarist Walter D. Nims, with background vocals arranged by Tom Baylor, and an earlier demo of the song had actually been sung by a different vocalist, Johnny McCurdy, before Geraci was brought in to record the version that eventually became a hit. Number 6, Indiana Wants Me by R. Dean Taylor.
Indiana wants me.
R. Dean Taylor was a Canadian songwriter from Toronto who had already helped write hits for Motown acts like the Supremes when he released this song as one of the first artists signed to Motown's new Rare Earth label in 1970. Told from the perspective of a man on the run after killing someone who had insulted his wife, the record used sound effects like wailing police sirens and radio dispatch chatter woven throughout the arrangement to build a cinematic, almost documentary feel that was highly unusual for mainstream pop radio at the time. It reached number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100 that November after 15 weeks on the chart, and actually topped out at number 1 on the Cashbox chart, becoming the first record by a white artist to reach that position on Motown's roster. The song performed just as well overseas, peaking at number 2 on the UK singles chart the following spring. Taylor appeared on American Bandstand to promote the single, but he never had another song crack the American Top 40, even though he continued to release music through the 1970s and remained a working songwriter behind the scenes for years afterward. Before his solo career took off, he had already helped write hits for other Motown acts, including co-writing The Supremes' Love Child and The Temptations' All I Need. He found modest chart success again in the UK with There's a Ghost in My House, which reached number 3 there in 1974, even though it barely registered back home in the United States. Indiana Wants Me was released on Motown's Rare Earth label, a subsidiary the company had specifically created to market rock music to white audiences, making Taylor's success there something of a novelty within the larger Motown roster at the time. Number 5, Little Green Apples by O.C. Smith.
Oh, God didn't make little green apples.
Songwriter Bobby Russell originally wrote this song for country singer Roger Miller, who released the first recording of it in February 1968, taking it to number 6 on the country chart and number 39 on the pop chart, his final top 40 crossover hit. Soul singer O.C. Smith, a former member of Count Basie's band, recorded his own version soon after, and when a Detroit disc jockey started playing an album cut of it that spring, listener demand pushed his record label to release it as an official single. Smith's version climbed to number 2 on both the Billboard Hot 100 and the R&B chart that October, eventually selling over 1 million copies domestically and earning a gold record from the RIAA for that achievement. The song went on to win Bobby Russell the 1969 Grammy Award for Song of the Year, along with a second Grammy for Best Country Song. Despite that success and its instant recognizability at the time, with lyrics built around small, everyday examples of devoted love rather than grand romantic gestures.
Don't rain in Indianapolis in the summertime.
The song rarely gets airplay today, even on stations dedicated to music from that exact period. Beyond Roger Miller and O.C. Smith's versions, singer Patti Page also released her own recording of the song that same year, reaching number 11 on the Easy Listening chart, bringing the total number of recorded versions released in 1968 alone to several dozen. Bobby Russell went on to write other major hits that same year, including Honey, a number 1 for Bobby Goldsboro, and later The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia, a number 1 hit for his then-wife, actress, and singer, Vicki Lawrence. Roger Miller's original recording session took place on January 24, 1968, at Columbia's Nashville studio, while O.C. Smith's version climbed to its number 2 peak on the chart, dated October 26, 1968, becoming the version most people remembered by the end of that year. Smith continued recording into the 1980s before becoming a pastor and founding a church in Los Angeles, where he remained until his death in 2001.
I think about her face aglow to ease.
Number 4, Judy in Disguise, with Glasses by John Fred and his Playboy Band.
Judy in the sky. Well, that's what you are.
John Fred Gourier, a former college basketball and baseball standout, had been leading bands out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana since the 1950s, with little national success when he misheard the lyrics to the Beatles' Lucy in the Sky, with diamonds as Lucy in disguise. He and bandmate Andrew Bernard turned that mishearing into their own song, swapping in a real woman he'd noticed wearing oversized glasses as the inspiration for the title character. Released in late 1967, Judy in Disguise reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in January 1968, holding that position for 2 weeks, and in the process, knocking the Beatles' own Hello, Goodbye out of the top spot. John Fred later said that when he eventually met John Lennon in person, the first thing Lennon brought up was how much he loved the song, even joking that he wanted to write his own parody in return.
Keep wearing your bracelets.
The song topped the charts in several other countries as well, including Germany and Switzerland, but it remained the only major hit of Fred's career. The song also reached number 3 in both Canada and the United Kingdom, giving it genuine international reach well beyond the American charts. Fred had scored a very minor hit years earlier in 1959 with a song called Shirley, which, in an odd twist, later became a much bigger hit for Welsh rocker Shakin' Stevens when he covered it in the UK in 1982. Judy in Disguise was recorded for Paula Records, a Shreveport, Louisiana label, with Out of Left Field on the B-side, and Fred based the song's title character directly on a real woman he had noticed one day, wearing unusually large glasses. Fred continued performing regionally in Louisiana for decades afterward, largely out of the national spotlight.
Judy in the sky with glasses.
Number 3, Snoopy vs. the Red Baron by the Royal Guardsmen. This novelty song came from 6 Ocala, Florida teenagers, most of them still in high school, who recorded it at a small studio in Tampa in 1966, built around Charles Schulz's Peanuts storyline of Snoopy imagining himself as a World War I flying ace battling the German pilot known as the Red Baron. The record climbed all the way to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 during the last week of 1966, kept out of the top spot only by the Monkees' I'm a Believer, and it also reached number 1 in Australia, where it held the top spot for 5 straight weeks. There was just one problem. Nobody had actually asked Schulz for permission to use Snoopy's name, and he and United Features Syndicate sued the band and its label. The Canadian arm of the record label held off releasing the single until the dispute was settled, and the band recorded an alternate version using a character called Squeaky instead, just in case.
10, 20, 30, 40, 50 or more.
Schultz eventually gave his blessing, and all the publishing revenue from the song went to him and the syndicate rather than the band. He even allowed the Royal Guardsmen to record several sequel songs afterward, including The Return of the Red Baron, Snoopy's Christmas, Snoopy for President, and The Smallest Astronaut, though none matched the success of the original. The song was written by Phil Gernhardt and Dick Holler, the same Dick Holler who later wrote the more serious hit, Abraham, Martin, and John. The band's name itself came from a model of guitar amplifier called the Royal Guardsman, chosen because it sounded suitably British at the height of the British invasion. The record was recorded at Charles Fuller Production Studio in Tampa and released on Laurie Records in November 1966. Because of the ongoing lawsuit, the Canadian arm of the label initially refused to release the song at all, instead putting out the band's disguised alternate version, Squeaky versus the Black Knight, until Schultz finally gave his approval and the original was allowed across the border. The band never scored a hit outside of the character's shadow and faded from the national charts within a couple of years.
Of the bloody red baron of Germany.
Number 2, kind of a drag by the Buckinghams. The Buckinghams were a young Chicago band who had only just changed their name from the Pulsations when this song, written by their friend Jim Holvey, shot to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in February 1967. It held the top spot for 2 weeks, becoming the first number 1 hit of that calendar year and earning the band a gold record for selling over 1 million copies within just a few months of release. Recorded quickly at Chess Studios in Chicago under producer Carl Bonafide and arranger Dan Belloc, the track's horn-driven arrangement helped define a sound the city would become closely associated with for the rest of the decade. Billboard magazine went on to call the Buckinghams the most listened-to band in America for 1967, as they followed up with several more top 10 hits over the following months. Despite that momentum, the band's success collapsed almost as quickly as it arrived, and by 1968, they couldn't crack the top 40 again as musical tastes shifted toward album-oriented rock. Broke up in 1970, reformed a decade later, and continues to tour today. Though Kind of a Drag remains the song most people, if they remember it at all, associate with them. In the months after their first number 1, the group scored a run of additional top 20 hits, including Don't You Care, Mercy, 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 and Susan, working with a young producer and arranger named James William Guercio, who would go on to become a major figure in the careers of Chicago in Blood, Sweat and Tears. Keyboardist Marty Greb, who played on many of those recordings, later spent decades touring with Bonnie Raitt and working alongside musicians like Eric Clapton. The song was recorded in December 1966 at Chess Studios in Chicago with the B-side You Make Me Feel So Good. And once the single began climbing the charts, the small USA Records label rushed to release 12 additional previously recorded tracks as a full album under the same Kind of a Drag title, catching the wave of the single's sudden popularity. Number 1, Elusive Butterfly by Bob Lind.
You might wake up some morning.
Bob Lind was a 23-year-old folk singer playing small clubs in Denver, having dropped out of Western State College when he wrote this song in one sitting as the sun came up after a sleepless night. He said he was inspired partly by the W.B. Yeats poem, The Song of Wandering Aengus, wanting to capture that same restless feeling of chasing something just out of reach. The song was originally tucked away as the B-side of another single, but a Florida disc jockey at station WQAM flipped the record over on air out of curiosity, and listener requests did the rest. Elusive Butterfly climbed to number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the spring of 1966, helped along by a lush string arrangement from producer Jack Nitzsche, who was known at the time for his work with the Rolling Stones. The song reached number 5 in the UK as well, competing directly against a rival cover version released around the same time by Irish singer Val Doonican, with both recordings landing in the British top 10 during the same stretch of weeks in early 1966.
Out on the new horizon.
It turned out to be Lynn's only major hit as a performer, even though more than 200 other artists across many different genres have recorded his songs over the years, a testament to his songwriting even after his own performing career faded from view. Born Robert Neil Lind in Baltimore, Maryland in 1942, he had originally released the song as the B-side to a single called Cheryl's Goin' Home, a track that later became a minor UK hit on its own for British pop singer Adam Faith. Session musicians on the original recording included pianist Leon Russell and bassist Carol Kay, both of whom went on to become some of the most in-demand studio players of the era. Before Nitzsche came aboard, Lynn's label had actually assigned Sonny Bono, then still primarily known as a producer, to work with him. But Bono got busy with other projects and handed the assignment off. The single debuted modestly at number 83 on the Billboard chart in January 1966, before climbing steadily over the following weeks. Lynn struggled with substance abuse in the years that followed and largely disappeared from the public eye, only returning to music decades later with a 2012 comeback album called Finding You Again.
Chase the bright elusive butterfly of love.
10 songs that once topped the charts, sold millions of copies between them, and dominated the radio for weeks or even months at a time, now sitting almost entirely forgotten outside the memories of the people who actually grew up with them playing in the background of daily life. It's a reminder of just how much great music from that era never made it into the modern oldies rotation, even after selling as well as, or sometimes even better than, plenty of songs that did survive into constant replay decades later. If any of these songs brought back a memory you'd completely forgotten about, let us know which one in the comments. And if you enjoyed this trip back through the decades, give this video a like and subscribe for more forgotten hits from the golden age of radio, since there are plenty more buried gems just like these still waiting to be rediscovered.